What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we are here for another episode of our Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast. Let's talk Dynasty. Me and MFGDs coming at you live every Saturday, soon to be Sundays, but every Saturday for now. So, with that being said, guys, look, we got a awesome Saturday of sports here to watch today. So, we figured the Saturday stream in the morning would be fun. We're going to be talking breakout candidates or potential breakouts way too early for your 2024 Dynasty Fantasy Football season. So, with that being said, Texans Ravens game today, Packers Niners game today, some more football games tomorrow. Sean Strickland, Duplessis fight today. Man, there's a lot of sports on today, but let's get my guy in here, MFGDs, and let's start talking some fantasy football. War, how you doing, man?
Hey, man, I'm just, ready to get this kicked off, man. You're right. We got an exciting Saturday of sports, man. I'm excited. I'm pumped. Let's do this.
Let's do it, man. I like the dreads. I know you said on the last episode we'd have them this time.
Yeah, man. I'm bringing them back, man. I went on my little hiatus. I'm bringing them back. You know what I'm saying? So,
all right. Well, I'm also about to be on some different stuff. I've been rocking the buzz and the beard for a while, but I'm about to grow it out. I'm letting it go. So we'll see what happens. But I wanted to ask you, Ward, just before we get in, real quick, who's winning today? We got Ravens, Texans, and Packers, Niners.
Man, I did so horrible last week, man. But I really think we're going to be seeing the Ravens win today, and I think we're going to be seeing the 49ers win. I think the Cowboys losing to the Packers is on brand for the Cowboys just not being good in the playoffs. And I swear, everybody listening, I swear this is not me. I swear it's not Bears fandom. The Packers are going to get destroyed today. Don't get the receipts right. I'm just telling you. Don't think what you seen last week is going to happen this week. And as far as the Ravens, I think it's just a matter of experience. And I think the Texans, they're on their way, but I don't think they're ready. But, you never know.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing with a team that's led by CJ Stroud and with how they can score points in seconds, like they could do something crazy. I mean, it's crazier stuff has happened. Like you said, you never know. But for me, if you guys want to tail along at home, I got a little teaser ticket that I put in. I have Baltimore -2.5, San Francisco -6.5. And then tomorrow I have Detroit -2.5, Kansas City +10.5. So we'll see. I don't know who's going to win that Buffalo Kansas City game. My heart is rooting for Josh Allen. That's my guy. But I feel like Kansas City at +10.5, they should cover that pretty easy.
Yeah, man. Tomorrow I'm having a way more difficult time figuring out what's going to happen tomorrow than today. Yeah.
Yeah. I could see a situation where Tampa wins.
Me too.
So, anyways.
And it's strictly based on if the Lions let the Bears beat them, why can't Tampa Bay why can't they let Tampa Bay beat them? So I don't know.
Right. Yep, I agree. But hey, that's not what we're here for today. What we're here for today is we're here to talk 2024 breakout candidates. So you and I, we picked a guy at every single position. We thought, why don't we give the people one breakout at every position? That way, if you have a specific need or maybe something like that in your dynasty leagues, there's going to be options for you to trade for, or there's going to be options for you to seek in these startup drafts as you do them later this offseason. So with that being said, War, let's hop right into our first breakout candidate, and we're going to be starting at the quarterback position, but this is my breakout candidate. I'm going with Anthony Richardson for the Indianapolis Colts. And look, man, I feel like Anthony Richardson would have been talked about as far as probably from a fantasy football perspective, maybe not from an NFL perspective, the same way that we're talking about CJ Stroud if he had a healthy season this year. And I say that because when we looked at what Anthony Richardson put together this year, and I have a couple notes here, so I'm going to read them off for you. But look, he played in 4 games this year as a rookie. Obviously, in those 4 games, he didn't get a lot of playing time either because in week 2, he suffered a concussion, which forced him to miss some of that game. And then in week 5 is where he suffered that AC sprain, which did force him to miss the remainder of the season. So the sample size for Anthony Richardson is pretty small, but we know that in those full games that he played, I went and I looked back at the numbers. in his full games, he had week 1 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. He finished as the QB4 on the week against the Jaguars in week 1. Then in week 4, he played a full game. He played against the Rams. He finished as the QB2 in that week. So both times that he played a full game, he was a top 5 fantasy football quarterback. He was averaging 25.8 fantasy points per game in those full games. And again, like I said, only 2 games, a small matchup. But I do think that this is a guy who has all of the tools that we look for in that fantasy football quarterback, a guy who can rush, has a big arm. I mean, really, when you go over to like player profile and some of these other stuff, like the comparables, the athletic profiles, they compare him the most to guys like Josh Allen, guys that I told you I really like, and guys who've been really good for our fantasy football teams for a long time. So I do think that Anthony Richardson, when it's all said and done, if he's healthy, he's going to be a top performer at the quarterback position. And this is a guy who could be a high-end quarterback 1, probably a top 5, top 6 quarterback for your Dynasty Fantasy Football teams next year with a full bill of health.
I agree. Anthony Richardson is a straight dog. See, if y'all don't know, Andrew is this, I'm this, and I'm this. So I go by the eye test, and when I see a man, I just see an explosive fantasy football player. That's why some of the drafts I took Anthony Richardson as my 1.1 in my league when I drafted. Anthony Richardson, very hot ceiling. I think we definitely would have been talking about him, and maybe not from a passing aspect, but from a fantasy football production aspect, we would have been talking about him the same way we're talking about CJ Stroud. And he's absolutely going to break out next year, health permitted. I think they're going to do some things with guys like Josh Downs in the second year, some development, a little bit of development from the pocket from Anthony Richardson. And I think he's a perfect breakout candidate.
Yeah, you see Caleb in here, a couple comments. He says, congrats on the 1K. So thank you, Caleb. We appreciate it. Passed the 1K mark on the channel. So big milestone for the League FFB. Happy to have done that. But now we're on to bigger and better milestones, man. We want to get to that 2K. So just because we passed 1, we're not stopping. We're going to 2, then 5, then so on, man. We just got to keep growing. But appreciate you here, Caleb, and appreciate your help along the way. He says, love some A-Rich, and he says, hot take, he's going to be better than Cam Newton. So do you think he's going to be a better quarterback than or a better fantasy quarterback than Cam Newton? I mean, Cam Newton was a dog for fantasy.
He was. Cam, you know what? It's hard because I have it's a little bit of revisionist history with Cam Newton. Like, I almost forget how great Cam Newton was, I think there is definitely a world where A-Rich could be better than Cam Newton. I could definitely see that being on the board for sure.
I could too, man. But yeah, I think for me, man, the first guy that just was screaming off the board, and when I picked him and put him in the Google Doc, you were like, yeah, that's a guy, because I think everybody knows it's not a secret that Anthony Richardson is going to be good for fantasy football. And honestly, I don't know what kind of discount you're going to be getting on Anthony Richardson, but you're not supposed to be buying low on A-Rich right now. We're talking about breakouts,
No.
and I think the breakout is kind of built in. I mean, let's talk about some of the guys being valued in the same tier as Anthony Richardson right now over on Keep Trade Cut. And I like using Keep Trade Cut. I know some people have different opinions on it, but it is community-based rankings. It does kind of show you where the community is valuing people in adjacently to those assets. But in this similar tier with Anthony Richardson, like a couple guys ahead of him are like Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. A couple guys below him are Jordan Love, Kyler Murray. So like if you could take a Jordan Love, you could take a Kyler Murray and add a little bit on top of it to go get that A-Rich. Like, I'm definitely doing that. And then I think if you're playing in a 4-point passing touchdown league or something like that, where like you're like, I might consider throwing Herbert for A-Rich, or I might consider throwing Burrow for A-Rich in a 4-point passing. Like maybe you do that too. I think 6-point passing touchdown, I rather prefer the other two guys just because I think they'll throw more touchdowns. But Anthony Richardson, it's no secret that he's going to run a lot of touchdowns in too. So I don't know, man. This is a guy that I like, and I think he's valued appropriately right now. Currently the QB8 in Dynasty rankings right now. So that's my first breakout candidate. Do you want to get to yours, War?
Let's do it. I don't know how convincing I could be, but let's go for it.
All right. Well, we're at the quarterback position. You said you couldn't really find a lot of people, but you're going to end up going with Bryce Young for the Carolina Panthers. So talk to me, War, about why Bryce Young is breaking out.
All right. Before I get started, if you guys hear my dog, by my dog, I mean my Roomba. That's what it is. He's around. But Bryce Young. Okay, so slim picking. So because we either got the guy Andrew already took, which is A-Rich. We got guys that already broke out, so I can't use them. Then we got guys that are just bad. So I'm going to go purely based off potential. I said I go by this. This tells me Bryce Young is bust. But I'm going to look deeper than that. I'm going to look at the fact that this guy got picked number 1 overall for a reason. And yes, I know a lot of teams get number 1 overall for wrong. But what I will say is this. I read a stat the other day, and I can't quote it verbatim, but it said something like players that are picked at 1.1 quarterbacks usually don't have bust potential. We're talking about, if we go back years and years, we're talking about probably Jamarcus Russell and someone else. So usually when you pick a guy 1-1, he's going to do well for your franchise. So when I take that into aspect, it's just the things that, we seen with him coming in. Andrew was very high on Bryce Young, and I don't think Andrew's out on Bryce Young. But we have to look at the situation. The guy had a coaching change, right? He had the GMs get fired. It's just complete turmoil. His number 1 receiver got traded. Just absolute turmoil coming in. But the one thing we can say is that the thing that people doubted Bryce Young on the most coming in was not what ended up being the reason he had a bad season. People said Bryce Young was too small and he was going to get killed, and he stayed relatively healthy throughout the season. So all we have to do is just wait for those natural skills to develop. We got to wait for the franchise to put some pieces around them. They don't got their first pick this year, so I don't know how they're going to do that. They're going to have to get lucky somewhere. I think they still have 2.1, so hopefully they could get a good player. I mean, I would probably spend this entire draft on offense, and helping Bryce, because they have to at this point. But I'm pretty much just buying the ceiling of Bryce Young, and since I think he's going to be a breakout candidate, and for him, breakout candidate will be credible quarterback too in the super flex league. That's a breakout for him considering where he's coming from. I'm buying his potential, and I just think that he has nowhere to go but up.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, man. I'm gonna pull out some of the stats because you said you're the guy that kind of watches. You want to see with the eyes. I like diving into the stats a little bit, but I'm looking at Bryce Young's year, and I haven't really dove super deep into Bryce Young's year yet. But I agree with you to the aspect of not everything that went wrong in Carolina this year was Bryce Young's fault. And quite frankly, not a lot of what went wrong was Bryce Young's fault. Bryce Young did the best with what he could do with what he was given. And obviously, when you're firing a head coach in the middle of the season, if I'm not forgetting, Frank Reich was the first head coach fired this season, right? So they got rid of their head coach very early on compared to the rest of the league. So that obviously isn't good when you take a rookie quarterback, install a game plan and a scheme all offseason, and then right away you're like, actually, never mind. Here's an interim head coach and we're going to try something different. That's horrible. Your offensive line has been horrible. Your offensive weapons, your best weapon is fucking 35-year-old Adam Thielen. It's not, and he's not that old, I don't think, but I like talking about Adam Thielen sometimes like he's dust, even though he's not. But I just think that he wasn't put in a situation to succeed right away. I think the good news for Bryce Young, and this is what is probably going to potentially lead to this breakout that you're talking about, is that they do have a decent amount of cap space. There is a decent wide receiver class that is going to be free agents this offseason. Guys like Mike Evans, T. Higgins, Calvin Ridley, things like that, where it's okay, maybe you can go get Bryce Young, a guy that he can really rely on as a true number 1 wide receiver in that offense. That's going to be what is needed if Bryce Young is going to take that step forward. Nate Larson says McDaniels was fired a few weeks before Reich. So yeah, it was Daniels. I forget about Daniels. But regardless, Reich fired very early. But as I look into the stats of this year, man, Bryce Young wasn't as bad as it seems. I know he didn't finish well for your fantasy football teams. He was the quarterback 29 from a fantasy points per game perspective for fantasy football. So that is worse than what he actually put out stat-wise, because I'm looking at the passing attempts. He's top 12 in passing attempts, so he threw the football a lot. That all obviously plays a part as a bad offensive line, putting them in bad situations where they're having to pass on third downs and things like that. And then also negative game script, right? So they're passing the football a lot. Now, when you look at the deep ball attempts, he was top 15 in the NFL in deep ball attempts. You look at the passing yards, he was top 20 in the NFL. Air yards, he's top 12 in the NFL. So they were requiring Bryce Young to throw the football and throw the football a lot. That's not going to obviously always create the best plays. So you see he's top 10 in danger plays. Yeah, it's because he's having long third downs and he's having to try and make a throw at the sticks and try and convert a third down from 3rd and 15. That's horrible from a perspective of a rookie quarterback. So, you improve the offensive line a little bit this offseason with some free agent cash. You go and you get a number 1 wide receiver. You go get these things. Now we're talking about Bryce Young could potentially break out. But I think, the fantasy football numbers look worse than the year actually was for Bryce Young this year. And I think the community has really just given up on Bryce Young for the most part, already, because I'm looking at where he's being valued in dynasty leagues right now. And these are the names that are going right next to him: Baker Mayfield, Will Levis, Matthew Stafford, Kirk Cousins, Daniel Jones. He's almost being thrown into that tier of we don't really want these guys. That's the tier that Kirk Cousins, Baker Mayfield, Matthew Stafford, Daniel Jones, Geno Smith. It's that tier where you're I don't really want those guys on my team. If they're my QB3, I'm okay. And we're throwing Bryce Young in there after 14, 15 games that he played this year. What are we doing?
Kirk Cousins being that tier.
It's the Achilles tear, I think, that bumped him that far down.
He's not a mobile quarterback. But
yeah, I don't know. Injuries give people that little dip. But with that being said, man, I think the former number 1 overall pick, a guy that I liked the tape coming in, a guy who's very accurate when you put him in a structured system, he makes all the right reads, things like that. He just wasn't in a structured system. And I'm not saying, don't hear what I'm not saying. And I know this is your breakout candidate and I'm sitting here going on a rant, but I'm not saying that Bryce Young is going to be a stud at the next level, at this level. That's not what I'm saying at this point. I've seen enough. I thought that Bryce Young was going to be better this year. I, to this point, have been wrong. Now I'm not completely out. I don't think that we can look at that, what he put together, and say, oh yeah, this guy's a bust, guaranteed, done, I'm out. I don't think that's right. I think we need to temper the expectations. And at this point, if you have Bryce Young, I think he's a hold. You're not going to sell him at that price. I mean, you'd rather just hold Bryce Young than sell him for Baker Mayfield or Will Levis, right? So I don't know. Maybe he's teetering on a buy. If you have a good quarterback room where, think of my room that I have in Tea Party War. I have Josh Allen and Justin Herbert. I could take risk and go buy Bryce Young for cheap if the manager is selling him in that league. And then if he turns into a QB2 that's pretty accurate at the next level, then I'm fine. But I think you just got to be calculated with Bryce Young. But I do think that, you get some structure around him and fix some things this season. We're talking about Bryce Young as potentially a minor breakout candidate.
Yeah, I agree. I think so. You think that my idea that if he ascends to being a reliable QB2 in the Superflex League, you think that's a good step forward for him? Or
yeah, I mean, like we're talking about, man, he was QB 29 from a fantasy points per game perspective this year. So if he goes to, let's say, what was Baker Mayfield this year from a points per game? I want to say he was QB, looking at it right now, QB 17. If Bryce Young can get into that tier next year, that's a pretty significant step forward.
It is.
And so I think if he can get into what Baker Mayfield was this year, you can throw him in on bye weeks. You can play him if you get an injury and still feel comfortable that you have a guy who can give you QB2 numbers. So if Bryce Young can do that, I'd classify that as a breakout.
I agree 100%.
He doesn't have to be top 5 to break out. That's not what that has to
No.
be.
Yeah, no, it's a significant step forward. It's breakout.
Yep, I agree. All right, man. So those were our quarterbacks, Anthony Richardson and Bryce Young. But now we're going to move over to the running back position. We're going to talk about my son, man. Tyjae Spears for the Tennessee Titans, man. This is a guy that I've been pumping for how long now, War? Like since before he was even drafted?
Since before he was drafted, I thought you've been on him from day one.
I've been on Tyjae Spears, so I do want to talk about a couple points. Again, I have my notes here. I'm going to read you some of the stats because it sounds good, and it actually does give you some context to what we're looking at. But obviously, the Tennessee Titans, they fired Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel is out the door. There's going to be a new head coach in the door in 2024. I do think that with that being said, it does add a little bit more risk to Tyjae Spears than I had felt 2 weeks ago when Mike Vrabel wasn't fired, because if you keep the consistency of the head coach, you can feel a little bit better about projecting the future. Now, also with that being said, Derrick Henry has officially kind of given his goodbyes to Tennessee. I saw a video of him on the sideline saying, "Thank you for my time here, da 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 da." He's gone, man. Like, I can't imagine that they're going to be re-signing him, especially with Vrabel gone, and at his age and at his, the mileage that he has on his body. So they're going to be turning over a new leaf in 2024, probably entering a rebuild. Whether Will Levis is the quarterback or not, I don't know. They'll probably give him a shot again in 2024 and see what happens. But it does look like Tyjae Spears, for the most part, should at least have a shot. I think he has a very good shot, but for those who doubt him, should have a chance to win the starting job. So with that being said, I do want to talk about why I think he could be a breakout for fantasy football. When you look at what he put together this year, Tyjae Spears, he was a top 10 running back in targets in 2023, and he was only playing a part-time role. So this is a guy who is used as a pass catcher at the NFL level. And obviously, if you are playing in PPR leagues, that is going to contribute to a lot of fantasy football points. This is also a guy who is top 12 in receiving yards, receptions, target share, yards per route run. Like, these are all traits that you want to see out of a dual threat running back. But also, like, let's not just talk about what he's put together in the air, because this guy does play the running back. We want to see him run the football too. So let's talk about how good he was in the running game too. Don't let the receiving game fool you. This was a guy who was super efficient on the ground, graded top 10 in yards per touch, juke rate, breakaway run rate, and when he was given a full-time role in a couple games, he looked really good. So I do think that this is a guy who has shown us in spurts. Obviously, we haven't gotten the full workload from Tyjae Spears yet, just because Derrick Henry was there this year, but he has shown us in spurts that he is a very good, efficient runner, can break off big plays, can make the guy miss, and you can use him in the passing game. So he's going to be good for Will Levis in that check down department and be able to break off some big plays there. So I think he's just a dual threat weapon that when you put it all together, he's a guy who can score you a lot of fantasy points. Really, what comes to my mind with Tyjae Spears is kind of what I was seeing in Rachaad White going into this offseason. That was a guy who was sitting behind Leonard Fournette, obviously wasn't getting all the opportunity, and then in his limited time, was able to put together a little bit, was able to get some going in the receiving game. But then in 2024, they gave Rachaad White the full workload. And what did Rachaad White do for fantasy football? This guy's a top 7 guy in fantasy football, was breaking out and helping you win fantasy football leagues. So I think that can happen with Tyjae Spears. I'm not saying that Tyjae Spears is going to be a top 5, top 7 running back next year, but I see a similar path for Tyjae Spears. So that is why he's my breakout candidate this year. I love Tyjae Spears, but I will say that the community is waking up on Tyjae Spears. The price of Tyjae Spears is getting a little bit more expensive, and they're kind of baking in to his price tag at this point that he is going to be that number 1 running back in Tennessee. So that is something that is probably worth noting. But I want to hear your opinions on Tyjae Ward, and then we can talk about, some of the guys being ranked similarly to Tyjae.
Yeah. So when it comes to Tyjae Spears, I look at it simple. Like me, I'll be completely honest. I get all my Tyjae Spears cues from you. So, but what I will talk about is just the circumstances in Tennessee. So we got Derrick Henry. He's probably going to go ring chaser, go somewhere else to continue his career, finish his career out. And I'm just thinking about the aspect of what if they hire a coach that's more pass oriented. So now you're going to get Tyjae Spears not only getting opportunities in that pass catching role, you're also going to get Tyjae Spears getting more opportunities on the ground. So that's kind of just going to be a big boost for him overall. So, I mean, I think that we're going to go in. I mean, the only thing I would worry about with Tyjae Spears is if the new coach comes in and he necessarily wants to bring in another running back. I don't see why someone would do that, but Tyjae Spears has the talent to overcome another running back during the running back room. Hopefully, Tennessee doesn't bring in some coach that wants to prioritize a running back committee or something like that. That's the only concern I will have because, like you said, when you have a certain coach in a certain role, you know how that offense is going to be ran primarily. We know that if Mike Vrabel didn't get fired and Derrick Henry went somewhere else, more than likely the scenario where you will be getting will be Tyjae Spears immediately stepping into that running back one role. But if you bring in one of these coaches, and I don't know, I haven't even heard really of anybody who's interviewing in Tennessee. If you bring in one of these guys who want to have 2-3 running backs, that could screw you over in your Tyjae Spears share. So that's the only concern I would have.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I said, the firing of Vrabel does add a little bit more risk to this than I originally liked. But a couple people that I've seen get hired or not hired, interviewed for the Tennessee Titans so far is David Shaw was interviewed, Falcons or former Eagles offensive coordinator was, I think it was, what's his name? Brandon Johnson, something like that. He was interviewed. So like you get one of those guys, I don't know. Ideally, Brian Johnson is his name. You'd love to see like somebody who's offensive minded probably get put into that role. Maybe like I keep talking about him. I just think he's the best head coaching hire for fantasy football. I keep talking about Ben Johnson from the Lions because you put the guy who gave Jahmyr Gibbs, that type of workload, go give him Tyjae Spears, and they're not the same player. I think Gibbs is a lot more talented, but I could see similar situations, right? And so,
hey, but we were questioning the way they were using those running backs in Detroit for a second, though. Can't forget that.
Agreed, but Tennessee doesn't have a David Montgomery on the roster
yet.
Yet. We'll see. We'll see what they do. But anyways, let's talk about some of the guys that are being valued similarly to him, because right now he's sitting in this tier. He's currently the running back 14 on Keep Trade Cut. A couple guys ahead of him are Isaiah Pacheco, Saquon Barkley, Rashad White. Those are the guys ahead of him. The guys below him, Josh Jacobs, Javonte Williams, and David Montgomery. So it does feel like a pretty safe tier. I think the upside of Tyjae is higher than the upside of Javonte. I think it's higher than the upside of David Montgomery. I think it's higher than the upside of Isaiah Pacheco. I would take Rashad White over Tyjae at this point, and Josh Jacobs I think is in a similar tier. Saquon Barkley probably above Tyjae as well, but I think he's being valued pretty appropriately. But if he gets any more buzz, he gets any more hype, and then we're talking about Tyjae in that like Travis Etienne, Devon Achane tier, it's going to get scary territory with Tyjae. I think at that point you look at the trends and you say, okay, maybe we're selling Tyjae at this price. But right now, it's not buys, it's not sells, it's breakouts, and I think Tyjae can break out.
I agree, man. I agree. Barring some type of weird roster moves, yes.
All right, man. Well, let's talk about your running back. So we're going to go over to Baltimore, a team that plays today. You said Keaton Mitchell for the Ravens. So talk to me about Keaton Mitchell, man.
So
your dog
Keaton
barking?
Mitchell, yeah, the dog's barking. I'm sending the dog back to the dog house. So Keaton Mitchell, similar to Tyjae Spears in the sense of I'm looking at it as more so from a coaching, team philosophy, how the offense is ran perspective. I do think that J.K. Dobbins, I think J.K. Dobbins is probably done. I don't know. I think he might be done. And Gus Edwards isn't getting any younger. Keaton Mitchell, in a small sample size that he got his opportunity, he did very well. He was very explosive. He had an element to that offense that they haven't really had. Justice Hill isn't turning heads. They just got Dalvin Cook. I doubt he's even on the roster next
They
season.
They activated him to 53 today, so we'll see what he does today.
Yeah. I doubt if he's on the team next season. We'll see. But I think Keaton Mitchell has opportunity to break out because that offense is very running back friendly. And if J.K. Dobbins isn't there or they decide to move on from J.K. Dobbins, Gus is going to perform that role no matter if he's there, no matter what. That's just Gus Edwards' role. But I feel like the opportunity to step into that spot for J.K. Dobbins, I think the opportunity is there. And unless Keaton is more injured or the healing process doesn't go well, or if JK comes back and returns to form and all of a sudden, Keaton gets pushed back. But I think he showed enough to give the Ravens the opportunity or the idea to move on from J.K. Dobbins. J.K. was asking for a big contract and everything before he got injured. You bring in Keaton Mitchell, relatively cheap, played very well in the small sample size. Give the kid some run, man. I think he has the chance to break out, and I think he'll be fairly cheap because he didn't get to do as much before he got injured, and he's injured. So a lot of these injured guys get forgotten pretty easily. You probably get it for cheap.
Yeah, I mean, look, man, this is a guy who didn't get a lot of opportunity, like you said, before he got hurt. Played in 8 games, but he only had 47 rushing attempts in those 8 games. So it's not like he was getting ran a ton. But I look at kind of what he was able to do with the limited opportunity. One thing that, is worth noting is the team run plays per game. The Ravens were number 1 in the NFL. Like they ran the football more than everybody in the NFL. And that's what you're talking about. They're very friendly for running backs. But the fantasy points per opportunity, which what that means is how many points he gets every time he gets a touch, roughly, from his total points. He was number 2 in the NFL. So even though he got not a lot of touches, when he was getting them, he was scoring fantasy points in bunches. He was averaging about 1.2 points every time he touched the football. With that being said, he was number 1 in true yards per carry, averaging 7.1. He was number 5 in expected points added. And then they were number 1 in game script. So the Ravens were always up and they were always running. That's the thing with Keaton Mitchell. So again, this is a guy who didn't get a lot of opportunity, but in limited touches, he did look pretty good. And Nate's in here. He says, Chase Brown is my RB breakout candidate this year. Bengals can trade or cut mix in any time for no cap hit. And he's shown flashes in limited touches. So a guy, again, with limited touches. But talking about Keaton Mitchell, man, you said the price. So let's talk about the price of Keaton Mitchell. Yeah. Right now being valued as running back 33 in keep trade cut. That is in the tier of a couple guys ahead of him. Zamir White, Roschon Johnson, James Conner, Aaron Jones, and then you have Keaton Mitchell. Below him, Jerome Ford, Derrick Henry, Chase Brown, Raheem Mostert, Devin Singletary, like Chuba Hubbard. This is kind of the tier where he's at. So if you can, move you move a Devin Singletary and get Keaton Mitchell, you move a Roschon Johnson. Are you moving Roschon to go get Keaton at this point?
Yes.
Yes. What about Zamir White?
Yes.
So you're in a tier right here where you can do that. I think a couple guys. Now I'm going to ask you the interesting ones, because are you moving James Conner for Keaton Mitchell, or are you just keeping Conner?
I'm moving James Conner.
Okay, what about Aaron Jones?
Probably. And I'm going to tell you why. Because as we're sitting here talking about him, I'm thinking about, can I get Keaton Mitchell plus for Alvin Kamara in one of my leagues? I'm thinking about it.
Off the name value, right? Like you're going to sell the name of Alvin Kamara plus the good season, the production that he put together this year, and sell somebody and say, hey, give me a late second and Keaton Mitchell, and I'm good, man.
Because Kamara's he's clearly valued above Keaton Mitchell, right?
Yeah, he's the running back 25. Keaton Mitchell's running back 33.
Yeah, so I think I could probably get Keaton Mitchell for him. Plus the injury too will probably create some type of doubt. So I would definitely, but I would want more for sure than Keaton Mitchell. But yeah, I would
Yeah.
sell the name value in
Throw
the
me a pick
production.
and Keaton Mitchell, and you can have Kamara.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then you can choose to sell or make the pick later down the road, but at least you have a liquid asset.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I agree. I mean, just looking at the numbers, this is why I like doing stuff like this, because like even though Keaton wasn't my choice, then I started diving to the numbers with you live here on stream, and I'm like, damn, okay, he was number 2 in fantasy points per opportunity. Like I'm like, okay, I see this pick, I like it a little bit. And the price, not that expensive, so I do like this as a breakout candidate. But let's move on over to the wide receivers, man. I have a guy that probably is very popular amongst a lot of people. They want to talk about this guy breaking out. Look, it's a guy that I loved. His name's Jaxon Smith-Njigba. And look, man, this is a guy that was, if you've been tapped into the channel, if you've been, talking Let's Talk Dynasty with us for a long time, this was my wide receiver one coming into the 2023 class. Really liked JSN. But probably unlike a lot of your other favorite fantasy football analysts, and this is no shots fired or nothing like that, but I told you guys that, look, this is my favorite guy, but once he went to Seattle, I said, look, it's going to be a slow burn with JSN. It's probably going to be late in his first year where he starts to finally surpass Tyler Lockett in targets. Once he does that, then probably year 2, he's going to get that starting role as the number 2. Then he's going to have to kind of get over that hump with DK Metcalf. Like, it's going to be a little bit of a slow burn, but I did believe in the talent of Jaxon Smith-Njigba and said, hey, this is something he can do. I think we saw a backward step from Geno Smith this year, which is unfortunate. That's something that is going to probably cap JSN's upside for now. But I do want to talk about kind of why I like him going into year 2. So going into year 2, he's a breakout candidate for me. The Seahawks, they have finally moved on from head coach Pete Carroll. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but we do know that Pete Carroll loved to run the football, and he loved to use Kenneth Walker and those guys. So maybe, and I think coming with Pete Carroll was the ties to Tyler Lockett and things like that on this offense, right? So you get a new head coach in there, you tell him, hey, I got you a first-round wide receiver last year. His name's Jaxon Smith-Njigba, and he was performing better than Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and all those other mother effers at Ohio State when he was there. So do you want to use him this year? Probably. So they're probably going to use JSN. They're probably going to be moving on from Geno Smith here sooner rather than later now that they've moved on from Pete Carroll. My imagine is they'll probably do it in 2025. He does have an out in his contract here in 2024, but I just think the money right now, they don't have the draft pick, or they don't have the ability in free agency to go get the replacement for Geno right now. So I think they'll just roll with him in 2024. But I think that's coming because they were already thinking about it last year. Now that they've got rid of the head coach, it's probably that's just what these new front offices do. They come in, they go get their guy. Geno's probably not their guy.
Might
So with
lose
that
his
being
job to Drew Lock.
Yeah, they could, right? They could. And so with that being said, along with Carroll and Geno, I do think that Tyler Lockett is going to be out. He's 32 years old this year. He has an out in his contract this offseason. And if the Seahawks and their general manager decide that they want to go with the out in the contract, it will save the Seahawks $25 million long term. So think of what that offense could do with $25 million, and they're going from Tyler Lockett to JSN in a full-time role. That's really not a downgrade at all. It's probably an upgrade. And so I do think that that's something that they do. It's probably only a matter of time until we see JSN getting 80 to 90% of the snaps. And when that does happen, do not forget that when I told you this was the clear wide receiver one in the 2023 class. So when he starts getting those 80 to 90% snaps, you guys will see that happen. So to me, there's not a lot of data this year that backs up, I think from a fantasy points perspective, that backs up why he's going to break out, but that's really just because the opportunity wasn't there in like almost every single game, almost all games except like 5 games on the year. He was like seeing less than 70% of the snaps. So, that's going to change. I almost fully expect that to change this year. And when that does, he's going to be a breakout at the wide receiver position. So I'm interested to hear how you feel about JSN War. You think this is a guy that they're going to turn over you think they're moving on from Lockett?
Hey, man, you sold me on JSN last offseason, man. JSN, I think he has all the ability to be the wide receiver one for that team and one of the top wide receivers in the league. He passes the eye test, which I told you is very valuable to me. When I see JSN play, I feel like I see a guy that's learning the NFL and also dealing with some how do I want to say it, lack of ability from the quarterback position. I think he definitely is a true breakout candidate. I almost think that I think it was kind of a layup by you, Andrew. Pick JSN and at A Rich and JSN. I was like, okay, those two layups by Andrew, because I feel like those guys have superstar written all over them. And I think he's going to do extremely well as we see Tyler Lockett begin to age. The true question is going to be, can he overtake DK to be the top option in that offense? I think he can. And I think the sky's the limit for JSN, man.
Hey, look, man, we weren't picking sleepers. We were picking breakouts. If you want sleepers, I could give you sleepers, but maybe that'll be a video we do down the road as sleepers for 2024. But yeah, man, I like JSN. I just think that a lot of people, for whatever reason, expected him to be Justin Jefferson out the gate, and now they're like sour on JSN for whatever reason. It just feels stupid, but I think this is a guy, like I said, he's super, super talented. He cleared all the boxes for me. Like when it was coming to like my film grades in 2023, like before we had landing spots and stuff like that, like he was the only wide receiver in his tier at the very top. Like Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, QJ, like those guys, they were tiers below. Like JSN was by himself, man. And so let that be known. Let that be where it is. This is a guy who's very, very good at, he does everything well. He runs the route tree very well. It's a very complete route tree. And I think when you give him an opportunity, potentially an upgrade at quarterback, things like that, like it's only going to be up from here. And this is a guy who can be I think, if we were like making a bold prediction, like I would assume that, this time next year, we're probably talking about JSN similarly to how we're talking about like Brandon Ayuk this year. Like think of how good Brandon Ayuk performed this year. We're probably talking about JSN that same way.
That would be awesome.
That would be a breakout.
Yeah, it will be.
So anyways, let's talk about your guy, man. You're going back to Baltimore. You have a lot of Baltimore fandom right now, and you're going with Zay Flowers. So talk to me about Zay.
Again, man, it's the eye test, man. When I see Zay Flowers, I'm like, he's a dude for sure. This also has so much to do with the improvement of Lamar Jackson from the pocket. I think I've seen a couple things that made me believe in Zay Flowers. I already thought he was a great talent. And I'll tell you guys, full disclosure, a lot of the times I'm not the biggest college. I don't watch college football like that. So when I listen to my guys, I listen to Andrew, I listened to a Brandon, and Brandon was really big on Zay Flowers. So that's when I took the initial, okay, let me look into Zay Flowers. And the guy's amazing. I can only imagine what he would do on a team where they have like a guy who's a more natural pass catcher. Like, what if Zay Flowers was on the Green Bay Packers? So say he was on the Packers with Jordan Love, and I just see a guy that's a really good wide receiver and a big-time breakout candidate, especially if Lamar Jackson continues to improve from the pocket. I think the Ravens have finally found their bona fide wide receiver one. Get Odell Beckham out of here. Get Rashad Bateman out of here. As Mark Andrews continues to age. I also think, because I could have picked this breakout candidate from the next one, but behind the curtain a little bit, I didn't pick him, but if I had to pick a second breakout candidate, it would have been a third Raven on my list, because I would have picked Isaiah Likely, because I think that's another shoe that's going to drop here soon in Baltimore, especially with Mark Andrews, even though he's still young, especially with Mark Andrews getting injured. I think that opened the door a little bit. And I think the Ravens are ready to have a legitimate pass catcher from the wide receiver position. And I think that's going to be Zay Flowers. He has all the talent in the world, and I think he's going to break out next season.
Yeah, man. I just look at what Zay Flowers was able to do this year, man, and the bread and butter of what Zay Flowers was putting on tape at Boston College was the separation. This guy was a route runner, like a technician. And you go to the NFL level, you say, okay, what did he do when he got to the NFL level? This guy was number 6 in total route wins amongst all wide receivers in the NFL. Number 6 in route win percentage. Number 6 in route rate or win rate versus man coverage. Where he struggled a little bit was target rate versus man. When he was in man coverage, it's not like Lamar was targeting him a lot. He was 29th. But I think that's probably a little bit due to size. He's 5'9". So, you put him in man coverage, and even though he separates, it's hard to hit a smaller target, right? That's just what it is. If he's 6'4", you're probably throwing him the football. But other than that, I mean, I think this guy just wins at the NFL level. He's an elite route runner. And like you said, you put him with a guy who, not a knock on Lamar, because Lamar's been awesome this year. Like this, I truly think that Lamar has a chance to go win a Super Bowl right now. Like, and he's probably a guy that can win the MVP trophy too. Like, this has been a masterclass season from Lamar so far. But that tells me too, when he's 29th in targets in man coverage, how confident is Lamar throwing it into that tight window? Things like that. Like, but you put him with a guy like Joe Burrow, who's very confident in throwing into those windows. Maybe it's not as low, but he's been separating very well. I think this is a guy who can break out. Currently, right now, he is being ranked as the wide receiver. Where is he at? Wide receiver 20 in fantasy football. So if you think that he's going to be in that top 12, top 15 territory next year, where guys like Nico Collins, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle are at, if you think that he can make that step in, that's a breakout, man. Like, you're getting a 8 ranking difference in where he's currently being valued and where you think he can finish. So I think he's probably a buy at this territory, in a similar tier with like Drake London, JSN, Jordan Addison. It's funny, all those rookie wide receivers are right there in that tier. T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, like these are the guys in that tier. So I do like Zay Flowers, and I think he can break out next year. And I think it's going to look a lot better year 2, especially like you said, there's probably going to be a little bit more trust, and they're probably going to really lean on him as the number 1 wide receiver in that offense.
Absolutely. And I just see it coming from a mile away. I think he has a chance.
I agree. I will say that's a little bit of a layup too, though. So
it kind of is. It kind of is. But my next one's gonna be a real layup.
Real layup. And my next one's gonna be beating a dead horse. But let's talk about it. We're moving on to the tight end position, guys. And you probably heard the name. You probably heard the argument. Probably for 3 years now. Hey, look, Kyle Pitts. He's gonna break out in 2024, guys. And look, like I said, you've heard it a lot. And for the record, War, I have never been on this show pumping Kyle Pitts like a lot of the other people have. So this is not me just like, singing the same old song as everybody else. I'm a little bit more excited about Kyle Pitts now. And the reason is because, yes, he's had a couple disappointing seasons. They drafted him. Most people, dynasty managers, drafted him in 2021. They probably took him very high. If I remember correctly, War, you drafted Kyle Pitts in a league, and you had to spend a top 5 pick on him, right? Like, this is a guy that you had to go get over Jalen Waddle, over Devontae Smith, over guys like that, where it's like you had to spend good draft capital to go get Kyle Pitts. And so far, he hasn't lived up to that price that you paid to go get him. And you probably up to this point, you probably were looking at those went behind you, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, those guys, and you're probably like, damn, I wish I would have picked them instead of Kyle Pitts. That's probably how you felt if you've had Kyle Pitts on your roster. And I put out a tweet the other day. So if you're not following me on X, go follow me on X at Andrew2True. I put out a tweet. I said, how many of you, is when I was writing my notes for this show, I said, how many of you drafted Kyle Pitts in 2021? And if you drafted Kyle Pitts on your dynasty teams, how many of you are, 1, satisfied with that selection up to this point, or 2, have given up on Kyle Pitts and traded him away? And the majority of responses was, I picked him, I wasn't satisfied, and I traded him away. That's what it was with Kyle Pitts. So with all of that being said, this is a guy who is a year removed, or will be a year removed going into 2024 from that grade 2 MCL sprain that he suffered. He did put on Twitter that, or Instagram or something, he made a post about how he had to get some surgeries and things like that. It was a little bit more of a negative injury than people have originally thought. I guess it hindered him a little bit more this year than people expected as well. So maybe a reason why Jonnu Smith was being used more, but also probably just the stench of Arthur Smith being a jackass was probably the issue as well. But you go and you say, okay, well, now Arthur Smith is fired. He's a year removed from that injury. They're probably going to be moving on to what I have heard, and maybe I'm breaking news here. I'm not breaking news. I'm not Ian Rappaport, but I have heard rumblings and stuff from supposedly the lawyer who is finalizing the contract over there in Atlanta that they are going to be hiring Bill Belichick, that Bill Belichick is the next head coach for the Atlanta Falcons. They're just trying to get the timeline of that contract down, so how many years it's going to be worth. But the rumor is that Arthur Smith has backed up the Brinks truck, and they are going to be paying Bill Belichick a bag to be the next head coach in Atlanta.
Arthur Smith, no, Arthur Blank. Arthur Smith packed up his bags.
Yeah. My bad. Arthur Blank. He backed up the Brinks truck. So that's the rumor. But now you going in there, you talk about that with a little bit of context. Talk about what Bill Belichick has done with tight ends at the NFL level. And now you give him a weapon like Kyle Pitts. So let's get a little bit off of that argument. I want to talk about, some of the stuff that Kyle Pitts has done despite the coaching. So he's, like I said, he's never finished as a top 5 in tight end yet for fantasy football. This is a guy, however, who was number 1 in air yards in 2023, and he was number 1 in average depth of target. So when they were targeting Kyle Pitts this year, even though it wasn't a ton, he was getting deep routes and he was getting a lot of yards in those opportunities. So you give this guy who has the athleticism, you put him in a new scheme where we hope Bill Belichick or somebody like that is going to be prioritizing the elite weapons. And hopefully they do have the number 8 pick. They're going to be getting an upgrade at the quarterback position. Maybe a guy like Jaden Daniels, maybe a guy like Drake May. If not one of those guys, I've heard rumblings of potentially, as much as it hurts to hear it, Kirk Cousins potentially wanting to go play in Atlanta. I've heard that. You go get them one of these upgrades at the quarterback position. I think 2024, we could see Kyle Pitts get his first top 5 finish that we've all been waiting for, and it's probably long overdue, but I think it's coming. And so the breakout of Kyle Pitts is what I'm picking.
Yeah, man, I'm not going to sit here and lie, man. I thought Kyle Pitts is going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread, man. Huge tight end with wide receiver skills. Like I just knew he was going to be the guy, and Arthur Smith screwed him up. Arthur Smith got Kyle Pitts out there looking like, I don't know, who's your most failed tight end? That's what he looked like. I mean,
Irv Smith.
Yeah, he had him out there looking like Irv Smith. Like Kyle Pitts was up there. I think it was like can't remember the span of time between when he got a touchdown and another touchdown, but it was something ridiculous. It was like, I can't remember the span. Like, but it was horrible. And I'm like, that's why I moved him, man. But one thing I could tell you is that Andrew's 100% on point. If you get Bill Belichick in there, you immediately get a boost from the tight end position. Who are we talking about here? We're talking about Rob Gronkowski. We're talking about he who shall not be named. We're talking about guys like that. And I think that Bill Belichick is definitely a plus for Kyle Pitts. Now, Drake London, I don't know, but Kyle Pitts, yes.
Bijan Robinson under Bill Belichick probably gets a little bit of a bump too, man. But
a little bit.
We'll see. I mean, I just think even right now too, like the community has come down a little bit on Kyle Pitts, and probably deservingly so. Like I said, he hasn't finished great, but he's still hovering in that top 5, top 6 territory for a dynasty. But I think right now is the most affordable time. If you did believe in Kyle Pitts back then, you see the changes that are going to be coming. I think there's optimism for Kyle Pitts, and right now it's probably the most reasonable time to go back and buy into Kyle Pitts. If you did draft him and believe in him and now you've sold him, you can go back and buy into him. Let me talk to you about some of the guys being valued similarly to Kyle Pitts right now. And keep in mind, Kyle Pitts is still 23 years old. Like,
yeah,
he's still 23, man. So that's younger than Trey McBride, Dalton Kincaid. That's younger than all those guys. Okay, it's crazy to think how young he is. But Mark Andrews is valued similarly to Kyle Pitts right now. David Njoku is valued similarly to Kyle Pitts right now. Jake Ferguson valued similarly. George Kittle. You're telling me you could go take some of those guys and say, yeah, take Jake Ferguson in my late second in 2025 and give me Kyle Pitts. You could probably go make that move. And if you can do that, I think the breakout is coming. I think it's worth it. You're getting a very talented look, I said wide receiver. He plays the tight end position like a wide receiver, but you're going to get a very talented receiving weapon. And even if it's another same old, it just hasn't worked out in Atlanta, he's a free agent going into next offseason. So you buy him now, you get to see what he does with Bill Belichick or whoever the next head coach is in Atlanta. And if it doesn't work out, he goes to free agency and he gets to pick his next destination. It's probably the best time to buy in.
Yeah, I agree, man. This might be your last chance. So, I mean, if you can get a young stud tight end, especially, I mean, Andrew's right, especially with all the other tight ends that are in the league right now, I feel like this is the highest time of sleepage on Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, and that's a guy who doesn't get slept on. So, it's finally kind of the market is coming back down on Kyle Pitts, and now it's the time where we look at it and we say, okay, it's probably time to buy. So I think Kyle Pitts, he'll break out in 2024. My breakout that I'm calling is he'll have his first top 5 finish. But let's go over to your breakout war, and this is our last breakout at the tight end position. You said a layup. Let's talk about Dalton Kincaid at the Buffalo Bills. So talk to me about Dalton, man, and why you think he's breaking out. And then what does that breakout look like for Dalton Kincaid?
Okay, man, look. Dalton Kincaid is a dynamic tight end playing with a dynamic quarterback and a dynamic offense. His only hurdle is Dawson Knox. Now, you know what? And we need to get him out of here. Yeah, we need to get him out of here. You know what? Through no fault of his own, I hate Dalton. Not Dalton. I hate Dawson Knox.
Dalton. Okay?
Yeah, I hate Dawson. I hate him. But Dalton Kincaid, man, he's awesome, man. I feel like he's a wide receiver in the tight end's body. I feel like this guy, he's came in super high regarded into the league, and they put him in one of the best possible quarterbacks you could put him with. Not to mention, and I don't know if it's going to say or not, one of Andrew's first sons, Stephon Diggs. We don't know what the future may hold for Stephon Diggs. We don't know if he's going to be there. We don't know if he's going to cry his way out. Then we got Gabe Davis, Gabe never show up Davis. We got him there. And I just think we could definitely see Dalton Kincaid in a situation where he's played like a Kelsey or Mark Andrews, where he's the de facto number one option in the offense. I think his age and timeline lines up well with Josh Allen. I think Stephon Diggs. I think he's not going to be. I don't know how you feel about that. I think that's a ticking time bomb that's waiting to explode. And I think once that happens, the opportunities are going to increase even further. Technically, Dalton Kincaid is already in his process of breaking out. So I guess I'll go ahead and say what you said. I'll raise you one, Andrew. I think next year, Dalton Kincaid's breakout is him being in the top 5 finish in this position. So that's where I'm going to go with it, man. That's where I'm on Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah, I mean, I recently did a tight end top 15 rankings or whatever, and I had Dalton Kincaid as a top 5 tight end in Dynasty Fantasy Football. This is a guy who I really do believe in. I'll read you a little bit of the statistics that I put behind it just so you can kind of have those. But said Dalton Kincaid would be talked about better if Laporta didn't have such a great rookie year, but don't let that take away from what Dalton Kincaid was able to put together as a rookie. Kincaid was top 10 in targets, receptions, receiving yards, and yard after the catch. Kincaid averaged 9.4 fantasy points per game in a part-time role where he was splitting snaps with Dawson Knox. Knox has an out in his contract next offseason that could save the Bills almost $20 million. So I do expect them to move on from him fully at this point, but I expect Kincaid to have an increased role going into year 2 regardless. With that little snippet that I read you, Also keep in mind that Gabe Davis is a unrestricted free agent this offseason as well. So you're talking about in 2025, they can get out of a Dawson Knox contract that will save them $20 million. This offseason, they can move on from Gabe Davis if they don't feel like paying him. So, like you said, opportunity is on the horizon, and this guy was also top 10 in targets, receptions, receiving yards, and yak. So, this is a guy who's been very good. Just give him a little bit more opportunity, and I think you'll see the talent that you got in Dalton Kincaid. And don't forget, some of the stuff that we were hearing about Dalton Kincaid in the draft process earlier last offseason was Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott. They were talking about how they wanted to use Dalton Kincaid as the Travis Kelce in Buffalo. They wanted to get Josh Allen his Travis Kelce, similar to what Mahomes and Kelce have been in Kansas City. So they envision using Dalton Kincaid as that elite receiving weapon for their offense. They have a little bit more out of Dawson Knox than they expected, so they've been using him. But I think they ultimately, the plan here is Dalton Kincaid will be their primary or their secondary receiving weapon in this offense. And either of those options, whether it be primary or secondary, is an upgrade to what he is right now. And that should produce good fantasy football numbers. I mean, I've always talked to you, War, about I want to get tight ends who are the number 1 or the number 2 receiving option in their offense.
Yep.
And if you can get Kincaid, who's the number 2 receiving option alongside Diggs, he's going to be really good.
Absolutely agree, man. I think the biggest thing for Dalton Kincaid is just the opportunity. I think that opportunity is looming, and I think once it gets there, we're going to see one of the best tight ends in the league.
Yep, fully agree. But with that being said, man, that was our breakouts. 2 of them at every position for you. So just to recap them real quick: quarterback breakouts, Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young; running backs, Tyjae Spears, Keaton Mitchell; wide receivers, JSN and Zay Flowers; and then tight ends, Kyle Pitts and Dalton Kincaid. So I'm going to hit you guys with the YouTube stuff here at the end of the show. If you did enjoy the video, if you're still watching, I see you guys in the chat. I see you over there watching this video. Hit that like button on your way out. Really does help us. It's the best free way to show this channel some support. So hit that like button. Helps us in the YouTube algorithm. Additionally, if you guys are not subscribed to this channel, because I see my YouTube analytics, 88% of you or 90% of you that watch this channel are not subscribed. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, man. It really does help
man.
us.
Just subscribe.
Look,
man.
It's just a little red button. Hit that little red button, do us a favor, getting more eyes. Yeah, it doesn't hurt you. Getting more eyes on the show, it does help us out. And we now have passed that 1,000. So congratulations to us for passing 1,000. We're on the road to 2K now. So let's go get that 2K. And you guys can help us along the way by hitting that subscribe button. And then last but not least, guys, make sure you enter that Discord. We are doing on Monday, January 22nd, my birthday. So I want all of you guys there for my birthday. We're doing a startup mock draft with Caleb Niemi over on YouTube. If you've been around the channel, you know Caleb. We're doing a startup with him on my birthday. So go shout out or go subscribe. Make sure you join the Discord, because if you join the Discord, we are looking for people to mock with us. So if you want to help us out in that stream, go join the Discord. It's free to join. It's linked in the description. And we do trade shows and all that other stuff, all that's submitted through the Discord. So just do that. It's free to join. There's no risk in doing it. Last but not least, War, I want you to shout out your stuff that you're doing over on Crimson Mask. What are you doing over there?
Over at the Crimson Mask Show, we like to say we got pro wrestling with an attitude. And yes, we do. And just like the league FFB, we're trying to get 1,000. So, go help us, go subscribe, follow, like us, share us. If you don't watch wrestling, that's fine. Share it with somebody you know that watch wrestling. A lot of NFL guys watch wrestling. A lot of NFL guys are showing. There's a lot of former NFL athletes and collegiate athletes in wrestling. This is your chance to get to follow them, see how their careers are going. Go ahead, follow us. The link is in the description. Follow us at Crimson Mask. Love us, show us support. And you know what? We love y'all. We right back at you.
Hell yeah. And I will put it out there because there is playoff games today. So one more little promo for you guys. If you want to go play Underdog Pick'ems, use code LeagueFFB when you sign up. That link is also in the description. They will give you a 100% deposit match up to $100. So if you deposit $100, they will give you $100 for free, giving you $200 that you can use to play on today's NFL playoff games. So go ahead and do that over there. Like I said, I told you guys I got some stuff in over on some DraftKings, but if you guys like pick'ems, talking about receiving yards and things like that, who's going over, who's going under, that's what you're doing over on Underdog. So use code LeagueFFB when you sign up. If you're in any of these yellow states, you'll be eligible to play. And yeah, man, lots of stuff over on Underdog. So just use code LeagueFFB. I talked about free ways to support the channel. That's not necessarily a free way. You're depositing money, but you get to use the money you deposit, but it does help us out financially over here at the League FFB. So all that being said, guys, we'll see you on the next episode. Next episode, we're moving to Sundays because that's what we've talked about moving forward. We're going to be on Sunday nights. So catch us on Sunday nights for the new episodes moving forward. In our next episode, we are going to be talking about, we talked about breakups or not breakups, breakouts today. We're going to be talking about players you should be avoiding next episode. So it's kind of the opposite of this one, but we'll see you guys on the next one. Until then, peace out.